We're, of course, having speakers today around the themes of regional indicators dashboard. And our first speakers today are from the Metropolitan Council. Kristen Rybaturis is a researcher, and Libby Starling is a regional policy and research manager, both at the Metropolitan Council. We'll start with them, and then we'll move to Maurice Harris, who is a research analyst at Greater MSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, and we'll let the people find seats. So, my name is Libby Starling, and with me, Kristen Rybaturis, as you said. And we're going to be talking about telling stories with data using two case studies from the Metropolitan Council. So I actually brought the hard copy policy documents that I have pictured. So you can see that there are policy plans that work with this. And then talking about how the development of indicators in the policy process then move into the development of online dashboards in Tableau, which Kristen's going to talk about. So we're going to go do some back and forth. I think we have two handoffs in this. So it'll be a collaborative presentation talking about both pieces of that. So for some context, thinking about why develop indicators. And we developed indicators because in the policy plan itself, inside MSP, which is the Metropolitan Development Guide, or I think of it as a comprehensive plan for the entire 7 county region. One of the pieces that the council put in was an accountability principle, and inside the plan itself, making a commitment to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of plans and policies. So inside of this is the accountability principle, and Thrive is also explicitly outcome-oriented. And so one of the few times we've seen Milton Friedman quoted is to say, one of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. So thinking about this, Thrive itself is written with a commitment to look at the outcomes around which the entire plan is structured, and then a commitment to monitor and measure the results, which is why we have the conversation about indicators. And so inside Thrive, there's a commitment to develop a set of indicators. And then in the Council's Housing Policy Plan, which functions as the next layer of planning underneath Thrive, along with Transportation Policy Plan, the Regional Parks Policy Plan, Water Resources Policy Plan. Both of these documents have explicit commitments that indicators, both developing them and monitoring the progress and paying attention to them over time, is part of overall plan implementation. So that's how we got into this conversation. So in thinking about what indicators we wanted to look at in both of these, there's a common set of principles that we looked at to structure the conversation. So going through these intentionally limited in numbers, and this is probably the hardest piece because in any indicator conversation, there's always a tendency, well, we can measure this, and we can measure this, and we can measure this. And at the end of the day, we end up with 60 indicators, and you realize that if there are 60 indicators or 80 indicators or 100 indicators, it becomes very hard to really understand what's going on. So in this, we have been intentionally limited in numbers. With that, there is deliberately high levels. One of the key pieces is that we spend a lot of time delineating between what is in these two sets of indicators and all of the other indicators that roll up, cascade up, allow us to delve more deeply. And then these are structured around the outcomes. So both the Thrive itself and the Housing Policy Plan are structured around a series of outcomes, and within that, specific strategies or policies. So the indicators are structured around those, so it's clear what's being measured and how it lines up with the plans and the policies and the specific commitments and aspirations. Some of the more technical pieces, we wanted the indicators that were ultimately selected to be quantifiable, maintainable, and meaningful over time. So not everything that is important is measurable and quantifiable, but if we're going to do indicators, we decided to focus on the quantifiable. Meaningful over time, maintainable. One of the pieces where we had struggled over this is, well, here's a great indicator that we can only look at every 5 years. So we tried to say it has to be at least every year in order for it to really be meaningful over time. Informed by practice and research, it's easy to understand, thinking about a lay audience. So in putting these indicators together, we kind of did two different pieces. The Thrive work sort of came first and sort of didn't, and then the Housing Policy Plan work was chronologically later, but there's some key differences I want to highlight. So Thrive itself is a plan that was developed and formally adopted by the Metropolitan Council, and inside of it there is a specific commitment to develop these indicators. One key piece is the process of putting the entire plan together took about 2 to 2.5 years, depending on when you start counting. And by the time that we got around to let's talk about Thrive indicators, there was a significant Thrive fatigue. So there was no interest in actually sitting down and figuring out what the indicators would be. So the language that was formally adopted was a commitment, we're going to adopt something in the future. And at this point, we still haven't, the council has not actually formally adopted any set of Thrive indicators because there's the ongoing, haven't we done that? What, you want us to pay attention to indicators? So the Thrive indicators, as terms of what they are, is still an open conversation. The other key thing is to think about, and this has been a source of tension, is that the Thrive indicators are lined up with the Thrive document, which is encapsulating the council, our relationship with cities, how cities work with developers and population. So it's really trying to be a regional indicator. And one of the sources of tension has been that the council can't control a regional indicator. So for those who seek results-based accountability, these are intentionally population indicators, but that has been a source of tension in these conversations. The Housing Policy Plan, in contrast, was primarily developed by a working group that included some council members and a lot of members of partner agencies, advocates. It was ultimately adopted by the Metropolitan Council, but as a result of that difference, the indicators actually appear in the plan itself. So in here we actually have the tables of background information, numbers up to plan adoption, our little chart lines of where we were up to that point. So while the Housing Policy Plan maintains the same sense of being regional indicators, they're actually developed and adopted as part of the plan. So that's the context. So that's how we develop them, how we display them. Thanks.
Earlier in Libby's slide, this language was used, clear, easily accessible information. And I think both as producers and consumers of research in this room, we know that that is a subjective phrase. So in thinking about the dashboard considerations for the dashboard, we have 19, we've ended it with 19 indicators and data points for the Housing Policy Plan and about 29 for Thrive. So intentionally limited still resulted in quite a few. So how are we going to display that, and how are we going to show that over time? When we're thinking about these products, this dashboard as a product, we want, of course, to ask, the questions that would go into product design. So who are our users and our audience? What are they coming to these dashboards to learn and to better understand? Certainly in the context of policy and just more broadly. So how is the regional housing landscape looking in relationship to this dashboard? So I adapted a framework that was shared with me in a Tableau training, which I thought was really helpful for thinking about our dashboard as products. So there's 3 types. And obviously there's more types than that, but they mentioned 3 types specifically. Informative, exploratory, and explanatory. And so you can see kind of the characteristics of each and how they relate. So informative, update what's changed, what's the latest, less detailed, and less time spent there. It's really just to kind of check in what's going on. Exploratory, my personal favorite, where there's a lot of interactivity or ability to ask and answer questions that you have by playing around with the data and the features that are available through the dashboard. And then explanatory is a little bit more persuasive or strategic. It's meant to explain what something is about, and the user takeaways really drive the design. You're going to be really thinking about the messaging of like your title and your labels and what information you show. So initially, if you were to ask us, so what's the housing policy plan dashboard, or what's the Thrive dashboard? Which one? We would have said, yes. We would have really tried to say all of these angles or considerations in our dashboard are equally important. I think over time, we've really adopted or kind of came to grips with the reality that dashboard is a verb, not a noun. So we are embracing the iteration and the user engagement that is going to help refine what these look like over time. So our 1.0 version, for example, which I would say is what we have currently posted right now, is to get it out there, to fix what breaks, and to see what conversations happen as a result of the published dashboard. 2.0, you are asking, listening, and responding to user feedback and engagement. Maybe something very clear to you, not clear to your users, and you want to be able to make sure that they come away with what they are there to learn. So being responsive to that is really key. And then in a 3.0 or subsequent version, that's why there's a plus sign there, there's, I think, an additional iterative revision and update that happens. So while you don't want to necessarily create an entirely new dashboard year to year, you certainly do want to make tweaks as you learn how folks are using your dashboard. Certainly setting up analytics and testing groups, all of that is a great way to do that. We don't always have the time or capacity to do that though. And then of course practical considerations. So what platforms or tools are you going to use to deploy this information and host it and balance by time and capacity. So for example, Tableau, our visualizations of our dashboards are built in Tableau. This is the first time the Metropolitan Council had used an external facing Tableau visualization. And so that in and of itself was a great reason. We thought the dashboards were a great vehicle for that. We can produce static PDFs from the interactive visualization, so that saves us the step of having to revise and republish as we update or iteratively change how the data is displayed. And then we can leverage our internal databases, and again, we really have the benefit of engaging through interactivity. So by allowing our users to filter and click around and do some of that exploration, we can hopefully further the conversation.
So Kristen talked about indicators 1.0, and in both cases, in the Housing Policy Plan dashboard and the Thrive Indicators dashboard, we took version 1.0 to our appointed council members, one in November, one in March, and just to see how it went and to open up the conversation about really getting to the language that was in the policy plan, to remind our appointed policymakers that they have made a commitment to use this information to inform their future thinking. As Kristen said, this was really the first time that we've done anything in Tableau and put it out to our council members. And so the first thing about that experience is we, like probably many of you who have boards, all of our policymakers go through meetings on iPads because that's where all the information is. They get the PowerPoints, they get their material that they're supposed to go to. So the first experience of putting the information out was to completely lose control of the conversation as we watched all of our policymakers flipping around on their iPads, seeing what happened in the interactive website. While we were trying to have the conversation around what do the indicators tell us, what do we need to do differently, what questions does this provoke about the information and what the impact is on whether it's the council's policies, plans, programs. So where we are at this point is that Our indicators are serving the what conversation effectively, what is happening, what is the current status. But we haven't been able to get the conversation from the what to the so what and the now what. So that leap from indicators to action and doing things differently is the next iteration that we haven't gotten to. And so that's one of the next focuses. And so that leads to our final piece is how the dashboards themselves will get us there.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, part of being brave in publishing the dashboards and embracing an iterative approach is just listening to the feedback about what's working and what's not working. And so we have a little bit of that. Thrive was published in March, a housing policy plan in November. So it's still relatively new, but we are, asking questions, asking our core constituencies, what's working, what isn't working, what do we need to clarify? And so we have a short list of improvements. I'd say Thrive, we're maybe at like the, not quite at the 2.0, maybe at the 1.3 or 1.5 version. So you can see some of the things that we're working on here. One of the clear pieces of feedback we received is that, folks just want an at-a-glance summary, especially our council members. Just let's get there, give me a count of what's doing well, what's not doing well. So we see, improvements on the informative, to go back to the previous framework, on the informative angles of this, and a little bit on some of the explanatory things, because some of our measures do require several steps to get through. And so how can we do that visually? How can we do that in ways that are a little bit more engaging than just web copy or text? And also with the sort of broad base of data that make up Thrive indicators, there's really a need to provide a lot of additional resources or context so that if there's interest in better understanding kind of what this means. We have environmental data, we have data about housing, we have just a wide range. And so for folks that want to dig a little bit deeper into what this means in context, we want to be able to provide that as sort of a one-stop shop. And then, of course, web accessibility you see is listed under both. Always a consideration with government websites that we want to make sure that anyone who wants to come and use the dashboard has the ability to do so. And with Tableau, they're working on things, they're improving that over time, and so we are trying to take those best practices and apply them as far as they exist. With the housing policy plan, here, it's informative, but also potentially more exploratory. So we can add, we do have data at lower geographic levels in just the region. So we will be adding those layers and doing more spatial display of some of our information. So that way the indicator is the top level finding, but if you want to dig in and explore more, you can do that. Again, using stories and graphics in place of web copy. So when we talk about, for example, areas of concentrated poverty, can we walk through our users and into what that means rather than just give them the 5 or 6 sentence explanation about what that is. And then again with the web accessibility issues, and we're also ready at this point to update many of the indicators in the data. So we'll be doing that with our next release. And these are the short URLs to our indicator dashboards. Thrive and housing policy plan.
And do you want to do questions now or after Maurice?
If there's a burning question, we could do that, or otherwise, let's go to Maurice. All right, with that, let's
Good afternoon, all. I'm Maurice Harris. I'm research analyst for MSP and doing presentational regional indicators dashboard. So, quick overview to know what MSP is. It's created back in 2011 by Task Force Task, I believe, to try to better position the region in economic development prospects. Where they kind of joke about the St. Paul is that everyone's very low key and no one wants to really talk about their successes or how great we are. I'm an outsider, so I have no idea. So this was kind of a way to prop up the region nationally and also worldwide to know what new ways were using stuff with it to do well. So Vision and Environment region is recognized as globally leading economic economy where business will prosper. The mission is to accelerate job growth and capital investment for the region. So we have three kind of main goals with that: job retention, expansion, attraction, regional economic development strategy, and then marketing, brand promotion. And our office itself in such a way, research is underneath business expansion and attraction, helping our staff, but we also put the other staff in marketing, our regional economic development strategy, or the dashboard actually falls into that second pot, if you will say, with regional economic development strategy. So, as you heard before, there's a lot of dashboards around. And so what they want to do with this dashboard is kind of make it unique in the sense we're not focused on either one type of just economics, but social issues or environment, but kind of a broad approach to select indicators across different categories that would resonate with not just a certain group or individual, with the general public and also stakeholders, and try to mobilize how are we doing as a region overall, and not just in that certain category or certain specialty that we like to have. And so that was the thought behind it. There's dashboards left and right inside the region, across the country, that kind of measures how we are doing. And so this is kind of our big stab at, let's try a broad focused look at it and try to choose indicators that resonate with all of the region together across industry, groups, not-for-profit, business, government, and develop that. And so it's kind of a three-pronged attack here. So coordinated measurements, measurements that people can agree across all groups. So, for example, environment, water quality is important. If you're a business, if you're a private resident, if you're a not-for-profit, those types of measures where we can all agree those are good stats. Then share priorities. We all want a healthy environment. We all want a very good cost of living, for example, affordable housing. Those types of priorities that kind of build off the measurements to the priorities to where we can feel that we all can agree on this. And these measures will kind of help measure whether those priorities are in line and whether we're doing better or not. That leads to collection of action. We know what we're measuring. If we see there's certain, like education, where test scores or e-scores are fluctuating, constantly going up, we can actually mobilize those groups. Those stakeholders may have an interest in that to do something about it. I think one of the things about dashboards is that we see is that it tells us something, but we don't know how do we organize that towards actual action. And so the idea of the dashboard was to kind of push those stakeholders to do something about it, that just bring our hands up, oh, that's bad. Oh, which leads to strategic change is the goal. So that's what the dashboard is trying to push towards, that kind of push action to do change. And so the process, the first dashboard was in 2015. And so it was a 14-month process where we talked to stakeholders across many organizations, some listed on the screen here, as well as receiving data from. So 50 partner organizations, including Itasca, Med Council, Feed, Demographic Center, business groups, not-for-profits, to try to get a measure of what do we want to measure. We didn't want this where either Greater Mississippi or Itasca or Louder sit in a room and say, here's 50 indicators, I hope you all agree on this, and go forward. We wanted to kind of get a very good scope of what do we really care about as a region to measure and not just pick out of a hat. We also reviewed dashboards inside the United States and globally to see what they're measuring, try to get an idea of how should we approach it as well, to see where we're on target or kind of going off left field. And then we collected thousands of metrics, which of course will go down because they won't fit on a So, as before, we were looking at outcome, not input. We didn't want to look at just throwing data in, but we want to say what those outcomes are as we build a dashboard. Understandable. We want this to be not just, because with data, of course, people working data, we like to know whether it's significant, whether it's, the correlation, which is important behind the scenes work, but to the general public, we want to make sure that they know what the data says, that easy to understand, accessible, that anyone can pick up and realize and say, I can get this, and not what I could use. Current and accessible, we want the data to be accurate within a year, and also easy to update as well as the process. We're now in our third volume, and so the goal was we can update this data year over year without many issues. At this point, we've been mostly successful based on federal government issues. Sometimes I have to either find a new data set to replace one of the points in it for the previous year, but that's the ultimate goal, is make sure that data is current, that data is the actual number, not relative ranking, so we didn't look at indexes. Indexes are at multi, it tells you a number, you kind of get the mean, no one knows what it means sometimes. We want actual numbers and not just a rank that says Minneapolis and Paul first based on name the factors. We wanted a metro to metro comparable. So the actual full MSA based on the office management budget, not just the city or part of the region, but actual apples to apples comparing across all regions. Predictive, not backward looking. We kind of want it to be, we want to see trends going forward in a sense, kind of looking backward, kind of those ways of it, but we don't want to see what happened in the past to kind of judging actions for the future. We're going to make sure that we're kind of telling us what we could expect. For example, one of our indicators is net migration of 18 to 25-year-olds, which can give us a sense of workforce needs, where we're tracking the population to fill current jobs. And so we're kind of looking at indicators that will tell us what we can expect in the future, not, well, we looked good 10 years ago, that's great. But that's tell us how to help us down the road. And then the potential influence direction. We want indicators that will kind of get those stakeholders, get partners to kind of look at this data and say, we could do some work to improve this category that we see as a major issue. So we kind of wanted to kind of force people outside the comfort zone of saying, it's nice, but we don't really care to, we should do something about it. So the categories we have, the economy, that kind of this overall measure of how the regional economy is doing. This is vitality, so this more focuses on venture capital, for example, whether it's the capital or resources in a region to help create new jobs and businesses for people. Talent, migration, education graduation rates. So H-1B visas, for example, are how many percent of increase we have on those. Education, test scores, graduation rate for high school and for college, and also breakdown based on white versus people of color as well, to see whether are we staying in line or we're flipping on one or the other. Infrastructure, south bridges, airport, highway conditions, environment, water quality, air quality, and livability, based on crime, health, federal health as well. And then the vital stats, which kind of your basic population, GDP, so forth. So this was created based on kind of grouping those into those categories based on the discussions we had with the working group as well. So to kind of easily categorize, we understand what those mean. And so they chose 11 peer regions. This was based on several factors, such as competitiveness we have for cities with, in our world, and where we may compete with Chicago for a business attraction opportunity. That was one of the categorizations. Similar socioeconomic levels, some are aspirational. Like, do we want to be like Seattle? Yes, no, but it was kind of those factors that kind of came into how we put these peer regions, how to benchmark ourselves. And we're, in the next year, we're planning to review those things as well to see whether things change in 3 years. So either keep the same group or find another cities to take off, replace them with. So this is kind of an ongoing question we have about how we benchmark ourselves to other regions in the country. This is the actual dashboard, the actual data one. You see category over 50 50 indicators across those categories, the back of their ranking. So for the most part, regions were pretty solid. The ones we kind of keep that when we talk to regional credits working group is kind of factors concern us. For example, venture capital is that one weird indicator that can say a lot yet not at the same time. It's a category that some organizations do keep track of. PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, has kind of data that with that number, but venture capital comes from everywhere. It's one of the hard to track ones. So every time we have a discussion, we're slipping. We're kind of like, yeah, but number of flights we have coming out of International Airport, number of direct flights, kind of a good measure on business attraction, for example, because you want to have an airport that has great connections that attracts business to come to. Net migration I mentioned as well, which is not bad, not good. We're kind of in the middle. Chicago, though, is ranked below us. They're losing one sales, 5,000, net loss of 5,000 region. So in retrospect, we're actually at a very good spot. Peter is also in the front, so it's full. Well, this is about that page on the back, kind of the basic information I know. First regional product, first per capita, total number of jobs, top tier tax rate, that's always someone we have discussions about. Population, kind of basic general comparing ourselves across those regions. And also on that, on the dashboard we have MSP trend, so tracking over that from year to year, as well as a peer ranking, so comparing ourselves with those 11 peer regions. So when they say we're doing great at it, we're kind of flipping nationally with those peer groups, while we have one where we're not doing so well, but better than nation. So it's kind of a way to track both regionally and also across the country as well. So as I mentioned, this regional status working group is actually a group of those organizations that meet, I would say, every other month at this point to go over the data that we produce, to figure out what are the issues that we're facing in the region, to see how can we mobilize partnerships in the region with not-for-profit, with other groups that may have an interest in this, and try to build kind of that ground up. How can we attack these different indicators, and how can we have change occur? So I know in August we're planning to event focusing on the topic that we can't do on top of my head right now, but they're trying to meet regularly to kind of say, we have the data, what's your next step? So for example, this is a separate meeting. But for example, racial employment gap. Minneapolis, that's 13% employment gap in white and people of color, which the trend is the same. We're gone up in the peer ranking to 11. And so we look at the cities on the left list. So we're kind of above Pittsburgh. And so the goal is to be Berkeley on 5. And so we kind of break it down to the sense of what do we need to do to move that number upward. And so we have to break down, you know, be the best, need to increase 20 by 48,000 jobs. How do you do that? I don't know. But that's what kind of information we kind of show our partners, show people in the region of what do we need to do to move that needle up or down. So it's kind of getting that, not just a number, but kind of getting more broad-based, kind of a quick info first of here's the numbers we need to know to make move the needle. It's like sort of static sheet that's just everything. Same with net migration. As you know, and you saw in the start reviewing it, we were facing a very serious workers gap in the next 4 to 5 years. And so in order to be the top 5, Dallas, Austin, Seattle, Atlanta, what do we need to move that needle up to encourage people to stay here or to move to the region to take those jobs that are coming up? So, almost 1,000%. Do the best in the group with Dallas, or just to move up one spot above San Francisco, create 100 jobs. And so we're partnerships like MSP to help encourage, to help attract workers, also encourage them to stay in the region, not leave after a year or two. Yeah. This is data as of this past year. So that's 2015 data. Yeah, census, most of the census get is kind of your census data, for example, government sources, some information like the venture capital on a private for Cooper, we try to make sure data is easy to access to double check it sometimes. And we also have like a technical appendix that we have on the website for people where you can pull our data sources and look for it yourself. So that's cool. So yeah, so this is 2015 data. So kind of give an idea about what we need to do with that gap. A very example. And layer participation rate. Where does that? Which is good and bad for some. Some businesses see it as you're tapped out. No one else, we can't hire anyone else in this region apparently. And so that's kind of a good thing, bad thing all. But, and when we compare to strength and weaknesses, Emerson is less than high school grads, U3240, nursing age 1370, seniors 1120, to try and get into the workforce to try to keep going.
Just going back to one slide,
Yeah.
the migration of younger people. This has been much discussed in publicly, and lots of people are writing about this. There have been studies, I know, by maybe your organization and others about what attracts this
Group two.
to move to
Yeah.
a place. And I'm just wondering how many of those factors are included in this dashboard.
Some is mobility.
So you're tracking the things that matter to people who are trying to get here.
Exactly. In the dashboard, I know some cost of living, for example, where they're more affordable. For example, 25 to 34-year-old age group is that, I would say, tweener group, because they're young enough still where they don't have family, but they're getting to that point where they want to raise a family. So, for example, we track average income, average weekly income, for example, to see how much a person may make. We also track those voting standards, so crime rate is important as well, number of violent crimes. So they kind of scatter in a sense within the dashboard. So I would say there's no comprehensive direct correlation. But in the sense of for us to know those factors that go into it, in the dashboard itself, I would say hit or miss, but we track at least a couple that can kind of correlate that number. And that's part of it as well as kind of in the future, what correlates with data, like what correlates with that number in our data set. It would kind of be like, we know these 3 or 4 things are going right, and this number should kind of bump up. When we look at the peer group in a sense, I mean, Chicago is kind of like our, I would say our rival directly, but it's one of the things that businesses kind of look at as well as Minneapolis, and they're losing almost over 100 people in the last year in that age group. So in a sense, we could say we're doing something right. Cost of living, crime, you can name those kind of indicators that kind of help kids move from one place to another. But as well, it's kind of one of the things in the future I want to look at is how these correlate together. If one goes up, this goes down. So it's kind of one of our future kind of goals with dashboard. And labor participation rate. So that's pretty much my presentation. I'm sure questions, if you want to handle questions, yeah, we'll answer. Yeah.
Can you go back to the racial employment chapter?
Yeah, sure.
What's the percentages in the middle bottom?
Yeah.
What are those percentages?
So I guess in order to kind of close that gap, what we need to do to try to, so we have 48,000 people between most likely people of color to try and make that to almost break them, or to beat us back. So Portland's at 4%. I guess to close that gap of 13 to be close to be next to Portland, that's something we need to, I guess, to close the gap to hire people to shorten the gap. I'm going to assume it's people of color. So yeah, I think the 14% is the percentage, I guess, of population, which was why it was up, but it's the gap to the 14% gap is the percent of employment of people of color currently. 40% is the gap, I guess, to hire more people of color with white. I'm trying to word it better, unfortunately, I'm not seeing that yet. I'm trying, so we calculate a gap between percent of population employed of white individuals versus people of color. That 14% is the percent increase of populations of people of color to kind of close that gap. So I know there's a 14% difference of employment between us and Portland. That's at 48. That's the 14%. I know I'm probably pushing it poorly, but so that's 48,000 people. We hire that 14%. That 14% of that population to close the gap. I never thought. So that's I'm trying to close the gap. So that's what that 14% is trying to stating that population. I think you might have a better answer. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's a great product. I've seen it before, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious. This is the third annual one, right?
Yeah.
And in the footnotes, you see this note. A lot of things are not significant year to year because it's annual data.
Yeah.
I'm wondering for the user, is there any plans to like present the data differently so you could perhaps have the significance in over 5 years? We would see that things are moving in a direction, but that's the tricky part about the year to year.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part. And we had discussions when we were putting it together about fiscally significant. And that's why I put that footnote there, because I think probably in 5 years' time, we'll probably do a better job of trying to track that from year 1 to year 5. Because 1 year change doesn't tell you much for some of these categories, especially the census data, where it's a change of 10 or 15 people, which, it tells you really nothing. And so with that note, it's that kind of balance between the technical side and the public side of it, where we go too technical, then you lose people.
I just wondered, do you have another product in mind, or?
I think it's fine when we get that. I think it's to be determined. I think when we get to that 5 year point, we have to look back and do that fair comparison on comparison. So maybe a third part where it's 5 year change. Because right now it's just a year change between the two, not from year 1 to year 3. So I think when we get to that 5 year point, not going to work, we'll probably have a separate kind of category for that, to track that as well.
I'd ask, Kristen, what data are you using? What's your kind of architecture?
Yeah, actually, you guys have a more sophisticated infrastructure with it than we do currently. We're using Public right now, and just working from there, but we are moving towards the cloud version as well, that we build in our work.
My question is for you. I like the kind of the way that you described how it could be informative, exploratory, and explanatory, and I can easily see the informative and exploratory. For me, the much more controversial part is the explanatory. Because I could do a nice indicator on gun violence, but explaining it, I may have a very different explanation than your explanation. So what's the process that you use for that part of it?
Let's start and I'll finish.
Sure. I would think that, explanatory in the context of our database or our dashboard, they really have a little bit more to do with, as I said earlier, kind of walking folks through particular metrics. So, for example, if we're looking at areas of concentrated poverty, some folks may be really familiar with what that means, other folks may not be. And so what an explanatory approach to that would be that we talk about or display poverty in general, and talk about what areas or what census tracts are popping out as having high thresholds or high shares of poverty, and then talking about what that looks like when we look at it for the region, call out those census tracts. These are the areas that we're adding up when we describe areas of concentrated poverty at the regional level, and then move in and have that last display be the indicator itself that we're using in the dashboard. So from our perspective, it's strategic in that it's providing context and a more visual explanation for some of the ways that some of the metrics that we use. When you're talking about residents of a certain age or something like that, that's a very easily, graspable concept. But for some of our indicators, we're sort of layered. We also have a series of indicators, for example, that are the share of station areas that have adequate affordable housing at different levels of affordability. So again, walking folks through what are the lines that are included and what are the station areas that are included, and then what does that affordability level mean and look like, and then what is the composite measure or indicator. So that's how we are using the explanatory approach to some of our indicators. Less persuasion, a little bit more story.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's more definition than causality.
Exactly.
I think the other piece that makes some of this easier for us is that the indicators that we're looking at are grounded in policy plans and documents, so that there's already a description in the policy plan itself about what the intent is and what the intended outcomes are and what positive looks like. So that gives us some cover for putting in the explanatory and how the indicators align back to what the intention was.
So both of you have dashboards, and both are roughly the same geography. I mean,
This is bigger.
60 county.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering how much, I haven't been on the website today, how much overlap is there between the two dashboards? And then, should there be more, should we have one dashboard rather than two? I mean, both kind of that kind of, I know you guys talk to each other, but.
I'll take this on because I think these conversations happened before Maurice got into this conversation. So in the 14-month development of the Greater MSP dashboard, we had multiple conversations crossing 6th Street and downtown St. Paul, trying to see where the opportunities were for alignment. And so to the extent that Greater MSP's dashboard is getting to some of the same policy outcomes and goals that are in Thrive MSP 2040. I think we're using the same definitions, but Thrive MSP 2040 is really getting to development patterns and the intersection of the built environment and livability. So we intentionally don't talk about education. We intentionally don't talk about talent. We intentionally don't talk about economy because the policies that are in Thrive MSP 2040 only have an extremely indirect, maybe kind of sort of connection to those pieces. I think we've aligned the percent of highways rated in good condition is one that, to the extent that we're looking at the same piece. The other place where there's a difference is we're not trying to do the national comparisons the way that this document is. So particularly when it gets to some of the water-related, water and environment ones, we have better data, and we're using that. They're trying to do national comparisons, and so they can't take advantage of the better data that the council itself can get.
I agree. We're in the sense of we're comparing, it's not regional, we're going to the full 60-time metro, and that's comparing each of your major metro areas with some maybe Phoenix, for example, is one county compared to us. And so we're trying to kind of keep a base across that and not get into this. Then you can't really track appropriately. It'd be kind of comparing apples and oranges every time within the categories. And that's probably one of the tricks with the dashboard too, is finding a data source. We try to with census data for a lot of it. We try to use private data as long as it matches up to the definition to make sure we're not getting this crazy comparison to apples and oranges. And sometimes data sources, and that's why we kind of chose metrics too, where we make sure it's all evenly aligned and not, this is a great data point, but there's only 4 or 5 metros. What's the point? So in a sense of what we're trying to do is, we'll kind of cross paths in a sense on some data points. Other times we're just kind of the ship sniffing each other, not by by intention, but
I prefer not to think of the ship sniffing as small areas overlap in the Venn diagram.
You mentioned that one of the like for the indicator that you want to intentionally limit the number of indicators, and it's helpful a lot of people want to say, okay, yeah, that's good, but can we look at this and look at that. And you want to honor that, but what is your line, how do you respond to that in the way of, the public and respectful, not like cut off and just track this and just not going to go further? How would you run into that?
My thinking on that is to start with the small number, because I think if everything is important and nothing is important, and people's attentions get spread too thin. But inside whatever that top number is, you should be able to delve more deeply into individual pieces. So get to well, what's really happening? If there's one indicator that's interesting or intriguing or not behaving as expected, delve into it and see, well, here are indicators that are driving that, here are the influencers, here are the other indicators that are influencing that, so that you can understand more what's happening if that's an area of interest. So getting to I want to know more, the more should be there, but it's not at the top level.
All right, well, great. Well, we all have homework to go look at these dashboards and see how we can apply it into our own work. As I said, look in your email for an announcement about next month, and we'll hope to see you at future events. Thank you.
And if I can say, if you do the homework and look at our dashboard, send feedback. Yeah, we're still trying to get people to 2.0. So tell us what works for you. Tell us what doesn't. That would be really helpful.